want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you are listening to For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you and your wealth and your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and the plants and the animals and the birds and the bugs and the little microscopic critters swim around in the puddles in your yard, and basically everybody and everything, because we are all mixed up together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And I've got an interesting show for you today. I'm actually broadcasting remotely. I'm in Pittsboro, North Carolina, of all places, visiting family down here. And Rebecca is going to be calling in. Rebecca Wood, my co-host. She's going to call in at about the half-hour mark. She's going to be talking today about the difference between hemlock and Queen Anne's lace, which I think is an important difference. Before that, after I talk, we're going to just chat a little bit here till about quarter after. Then a previous guest on the show, a fellow we've had on before, with one of the coolest names that has ever been on the show, Jesse James Deer in the Water, is going to be calling us about quarter after. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff that's happening up in Michigan in terms of nuclear power plants. There's a lot going on up there, some good, some bad, some kind of halfway in between, some ugly. But we're going to chat for a while, and then after we talk to Jesse, then we're going to hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then like as I said, after that, Rebecca, and then we're going to have some ecological news. And we have a nice mix of positive and negative ecological news this week. And we're going to be announcing a new contest at the end of the show. So stick around, give a listen. And before I get into the show proper, though, I have to say I listened to the start of Mick Gonzalez's show in the last hour there at the cheap seats. And, you know, Mick told us all about his experience. He had a mild heart attack last week. We missed him last week. You know, usually as we come into the studio, Mick and Coach are coming out, which is, you know, and he always, I have to say, he always gives us the shout out, the lead in. And Rebecca and I are always grateful for that he mentions our show. And I just wanted to say how happy I am to hear that he's doing okay, because we were very concerned when he wasn't there last week. And I'm also glad to hear that he's basically loving life at this point, because, you know, when you have a shock like that, you can kind of get down, but I think the way he's chosen to do it is basically the healthy way to respond to something like that, which is just cherish every moment that you got. And so shout out to Mick. I'm glad you're feeling better, and hope you continue to feel better, and you know, your health improves and your heart gets stronger and stronger. So now, as I said, I'm down here in Pittsboro, North Carolina, And it just struck me, I know I've reported down here before about how there's all kinds of environmental problems down here in terms of invasive species. And, I'm looking out the window here, this little bungalow I'm in, and I'm looking at a stand of bamboo, which is about 20 feet high and just sort of really thick. But it's still an extremely lush and beautiful area. And lots of rain, lots of trees, very forested. It's very full of wildlife, lots of birds and things. And in fact, this is a little recording I made about 5 o'clock this morning. I just stepped outside my door and just turned my phone on, and you can hear there's all kinds of bird life down here. It's definitely a little more lush, a little more, there's a little bit more action in terms of animals and plants down here than there is up and around Toledo. It's very beautiful, but I still love still love the Great Lakes region. That's still where I'm going to settle. But I can kind of see how people are coming down here. There's a lot of people moving down into this region. And in fact, this is a tiny little town called Pittsboro. But every time I come down here, there's like more development. There's more housing being built, and the roads are being widened, and it's really changing rapidly. And so, it just strikes me again that people get into these regions and they're like, wow, it's so beautiful here and undeveloped, and then they come and develop them. Somehow we're going to have to figure out a way to stop this process, because we need the undeveloped places. We know that ecologically. We need to have the places in the world that are not covered in concrete and not full of buildings and condominiums and group housing. And because every one of those trees is doing us a favor, is taking carbon out of the air, trying to bring the climate back to the balance that it was in before we started pumping stuff into the air way back from the beginning of the quote-unquote industrial revolution. And something else I noticed on the drive down here, again, I mentioned this in last week's show, and that is that they are really pushing to cut down all the trees that are in the right-of-ways of the highways, of the federal highways, even in places where no car could possibly go off the road and hit them. There's a place in Pennsylvania down there that there was a big part of the berm between the divided highway that's elevated. It was kind of like a little plateau, and it's impossible, literally impossible for a car to get up on that. And it was full of trees that I've been watching for 20-30 years as the forest up there got thicker and thicker. And on this trip I drove past it, and it's been completely clear cut, completely razed to the ground. And I have to think, what a waste of resources. We really, the roads themselves actually aren't in that great a shape, because we have been having so much heat, so much rain, so much weathering, that roads are actually going bad faster, because the conditions are getting harsher. And so, potholes are appearing more often, and cracks are appearing faster. And instead of worried about that, they're spending, millions and millions of dollars to cut down all these trees, which were doing us all kinds of favors in terms of pulling out carbon and blocking the noise from the road, from the surrounding areas, and absorbing the other sorts of air pollution. So it's, just a reminder that we're not there yet. We're not prioritizing the big things, the things that we have to do, which is get people out of their cars and into other kinds of transportation. We're human beings, so we're going to visit each other. We're going to try to reconnect with family whenever we can. The reason I'm down here is that we had a big family gathering. What our family does is, pre-COVID, what we did was we would have a monthly birthday party, and that party was for everybody whose birthday was in that month. And so once a month we'd get together and have a birthday for 3 or 4. And actually May is the one where we have the most birthdays in the same month. There's 6 of us that have birthdays in May. So we decided to come down to North Carolina to visit my sister, who lives down here, because she's always kind of isolated, because everybody else is in Western New York, except for me, of course, in Toledo. But it was great. Had a lot of fun. big Italian family, so we actually did the stereotypical Italian things. We made homemade pasta, which turned out great. Made it from scratch with flour and eggs and stuff, and with the great homemade sauce. Which I'm sorry I can't share the recipe for that. That's kind of a family secret. But one thing we did, my brother and his sons and my son, we all drove off to the nearby town to Chapel Hill, where they have this really cool escape room thing. This was my brother's idea. And on the way to Chapel Hill, we went over this beautiful river called the Haw River. And we looked at downriver and we saw this tremendous plume just pouring this really dark smoke up into the air. And we're like, what the heck is that? Is that a fire? But we figured, we looked at the maps, and I think it was the Harris nuclear power plant. And it's just so bizarre to look at like an almost pristine looking, it's a really wild, beautiful looking river with lots of shallows and boulders and, the water flowing quickly in between them, and trees in the middle of the river and on the edges because it's growing up in that shallow water, but then looming over it like that, cloud that is in the Lord of the Rings from Sauron. Looming over it was this nasty plume from a nuclear power plant. And it just struck me. And whenever you travel, maybe things like that, these juxtapositions sort of appear more often to you because you're kind of out of your normal environment and you're seeing things a little differently. So anyway, just wanted to let you guys know what's going on down here in North Carolina. It was a really beautiful visit. We're going to be sticking around here for a couple more days. And my apologies to people that usually listen to the video, the YouTube version of the show. I am late getting it out. I'll have it out today for last week's show, and I will definitely get this week's show up on the air a little more quickly. But it is quarter after, so it's time to hook up with our guest. Jesse, are you?
Hey, my name's Jesse James Deerenwater. I'm with Craft Citizens Resistance at Fermi II.
Okay.
We're here in Southeast Michigan.
All right, James. Well, thanks so much for coming on and helping us out with a new recording here. We lost the original recording that we did on Sunday, but I'm sure this interview will be just as good, if not better. So the reason I wanted to talk to you is there's a whole bunch of stuff going on up there in Michigan right now in regards to nuclear power.
Yes.
And one of the things that specifically happened was when they were doing this restart for Fermi II. It's been shut down for quite a while now for refueling. They had a reactor trip, didn't they?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they did. Let's see here. While they were shutting down, while it was shut down, they had issues, and as they were firing it up, they had issues. They also had they released the report of the different things that went down as they were doing the refueling. And on our end, from our perspective, the report was kind of damning. And yeah.
So I guess one of those things is they were having trouble with the high pressure water.
Yes. Yeah. The high pressure coolant injection system. As they were doing the restart, they like go to certain levels and then they like trip it, as like a test. But this, the high pressure coolant injection system went inoperable before the time came for it, for them to like level off at that test. And it tripped, and it tripped up the reactor. And so I believe since 1995, it was 48 separate incidents with this same system, ranging, from small to, all notable. all notable.
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of important to me to be able to inject coolant into your
Yeah,
reactor.
that's like the main function there, or I mean, for not main, but one of the main functions to keep the plant stable, right?
Right, right. So this actually should be a real cause for concern, I think, for people that care about the
Yeah,
safety of these reactors.
yeah, like uh, uh, definitely definitely something of concern. You know, I say this a lot, whether people agree about the future of nuclear power with or not with us. We don't want it, but I'm pretty sure we can agree on one thing, right? Safety. You know what I mean? While it's in use, you know what I mean? Uh,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Even the pro-nuclear. Well, I'm not going to sure what adjective to
Yeah.
use for that. People. Yeah. Even the pro-nuclear people don't want nuclear meltdowns. I would guess.
Yeah, you'd hope not,
Yeah.
but who knows? Hey,
All right. Well.
yeah.
But that. But so this. Since we're recording this on Wednesday, I guess the restart has continued, and I guess the latest number I saw was like they're up to 89%.
98%.
Oh, they're 98. Yeah, okay. Well, let's hope nothing else goes wrong. Serious.
Oh no, yeah, 89% this morning. Sorry, I just had to go back and look at that number because I wasn't sure, but you were right.
Oh,
You were
89.
spot on.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, but there's a lot more going on up there. For one thing, you've got this law here, this HB 6019. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So that was introduced by Joe Bellino, who's a rep down in the Monroe area, I believe. I don't know the exact locations of what all he covers, but yeah, this bill was introduced. It's a feasibility study on the future of nuclear power in Michigan. We don't know who does it. We don't know how much it's going to cost, where it's going to pay from, but we're pretty sure that we know what the answers are going to be because it was introduced by these pro-nuclear people, and it's being fast-tracked through the House. While at the same time, there's solar bills that have been introduced that have been not even looked at for years now. And I can tell a story a little bit about what this is in reference to what this bill is about. 2 years ago, I attended a conference, virtual at the beginning of COVID, called the Fastest Path to Zero, and it's a University of Michigan conference where I guess they're exploring the options to get to the fastest path to zero carbon, and one of those pathways is nuclear, and they had teamed up with the Third Way, a climate environmental type group, I guess, and to look at nuclear. A roadmap to supplying the world with nuclear to meet the climate goals. And that flagged a lot of concerns for me because it was the University of Michigan, that's here in Michigan. They were talking about small modular reactors and jobs. They were bringing in environmental people to speak. But I had talked to one environmental person on the side who was from here in Michigan, and that person wasn't even aware that conference was an ongoing, like, month and a half long thing where there was just a thing every week, and they thought that they were just there to speak about jobs and environment in Michigan. And I kind of put them onto it or whatever. But yeah. So it was kind of like a sneaky thing. And so I asked some other people about what they knew about small modular reactors in Michigan and this and that and the other. And a person from here from the Detroit area told me that years ago they advised this Third Way, consulted them on small modular reactors or something like that. They couldn't really go into it because of whatever, but yeah. And the plan for Third Way was to try to use Detroit as a manufacturing hub for these small modular reactors, so that they can distribute them throughout the world and throughout the country, and bring jobs, back to Detroit, as a type of thing. And so I've been trying to, I put all this together, and have been, saying that this is a potential future for Michigan. And this bill, House Bill 6019, lays out all that, that whole thing. And it's a study on if that is feasible or not, economically, environmentally. And so we're opposing it because we nuclear's unjust, and
it's,
that's not
that it's expensive and it's slow and
dirty.
You'd think with almost 100 years of experience in terms of cost overruns and accidents, and you wouldn't actually need to do a full feasibility study. But I'm glad you're opposing it, and you're not alone, right? There's a fair number of groups and people that also are raising the alarm on this one.
Yeah, there are, and it's all across the country because it seems like it's popping up at about the same time in different places. So luckily we have some other people to lean on too who are doing it too, and so there's a lot of knowledge we can learn from each other about this.
Yeah, we have something similar here with our House Bill 464 that they want to turn Ohio into a nuclear waste dump, basically. So, yeah, it's all coming to a head at once. But one of the things that sort of made me want to call you is that they announced this hearing. It happened just this past Monday, I guess, and you actually went to it. But it was a safety hearing, and it was sort of in conjunction with them releasing a press statement saying that there had been no danger or threat to the public health from all these problems they're having with the restart. And when you're an anti-nuclear activist and you hear a nuclear company say there was no danger to the general public, that's kind of like the worst possible thing. That's when the sirens start going off. So, so what happened at this hearing on Monday?
Yeah. So, and a good call about the self-reporting that DTE did about the HPCI pump, or the high pressure coolant injection pump, talking about how no health impacts happen and everything. So self-reporting worries us, and but yeah. So we went down there. There was only 4 people from the public there, and it was people from our group, and we just went down there to show our faces, do our due diligence, and things like that. I would give them an A+ for doing their job. We mainly talked to the NRC folks. We asked them all the questions that about the different concerns we have and about the different stuff we would like to know. And as usual, we're freaking referred. They're like, oh, well, those are questions we can't really answer, or we don't have the things for. If you'd like to put that question in writing, or we can get back to you. On the good question. So that's about normal. They did have a new person who I think is I think it's the chief inspector there. He's a younger person, and so yeah. I mean, it's kind of disheartening to go there, but at the same time, you got to show up. When I first walked in, the young new guy, he was looking at me, real mean, or not real mean, but he had that tough look on him, like he was expecting us to come in like they're trained to, like we're gonna come in there and be messed up towards them or something. They can't be human beings, blah 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 blah. But it's good to go in there because you see the same people, and you get a chance to talk with them. I was there talking with the DCE, Stephen Tate, and then I think it's their vice president, and then also whatever, so that's about all we can do, unless, we want to do something more, but
so
that's how that went.
So pretty much business as usual. They're not really going to tell you much of anything, and it is a little disheartening to hear that the chief inspector can't answer questions that you guys had. I mean, if anybody could, you'd think it would be the chief inspector.
Yeah, well, I mean, they can they answer questions, but once it gets to the more trickier questions, they don't want to answer them, and a lot of the times they aren't even the ones who fill out the reports or find the accidents or all these different things. It's someone else, so they're not even really connected to a lot of these issues that
are important.
that are important. They're kind of far away from it, they're just like, they just read the books, if they even do that, I don't even know. Gotcha. But it's a lot of books to read, right? Because we stay deep in the files and yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just one last issue up there in Michigan that we talked about was what's going to happen with the Pallisades nuclear plant. They were saying they're going to shut it down, but now I guess the governor of Michigan is starting to make noises like she's going to try to keep it open. What's the story up there?
All right. So, I believe they're originally Palisades was originally scheduled to be closed in like 2017. And Consumers Energy, who's, uses the energy from that plant, has been working on a plan to build out like thousands of megawatts of solar and renewable energy to replace the nuclear and the coal plants.
Right.
And but Palisades didn't close, and it's scheduled to close, here at the end of this year. And that's been a big issue because it's supposed to be transferred to Holtec for decommissioning, and we don't really want that. So here, like you said, here recently, Governor Whitmer must have, been swayed somehow or another to look into these Department of Energy civil nuclear credits, from the DOE credits, Department of Energy credits, like the $6 million to keep Palisades open.
The $6 billion that Biden put
$6 billion,
into Build Back Better,
and so there's a lot going on here. Like, it's really scary because they'd want to keep it. They want to keep it open. And it just has so many issues. The company Entergy had a hard time running it. You know what I mean? It has one of the worst safety records in the nuclear in the nuclear industry. It's like behind on maintenance. It's just
right, and it
doesn't seem like it can be saved, and that it's too late in the process, the license transfer process, for that to happen. So kind of like I was telling you before, it's kind of like an emotional roller coaster for us because we don't necessarily know what's going to happen, but it seems like it could be too late.
Yeah, and it's one of the most embrittled reactors in the world in terms of the metal lining, being after being bombarded by radiation for decades. If you had to dump cold water into the hot reactor, it's actually one of the most likely to fail in the country and the world.
Yes, one of the worst embrittled reactors and one of the oldest, and has its spent fuel pond is in terrible shape. They're gonna have to move the fuel out of that really quick, and so it's just there's that whole $6 billion probably wouldn't cover everything that's going on with that plant,
Right. Yeah. Even if they got all of it, you probably couldn't keep it open. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Jesse, for coming on and being willing to re-record this interview.
If people want to find out more about craft, how do they do that?
Well, you can go to our website, which is shutdownfermi.org. And there's different ways to get a hold of us there. And then shoot us an email, shutdownfermi.org, shutdownfermi@gmail. And we're also on Facebook, Craft Citizens Resistance at Fermi II.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
And For Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats and lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There's several ways we can get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, which is wcparks.org. And they have a lot of nifty information there. You can also download their app. Go to any app store and search for WC Parks. And of course, they're on all the social media, Instagram, Twitter, I think TikTok. I got to check in on that. I actually don't know much about TikTok, but definitely Facebook and all those sorts of social media. That's the Wood County Park District. For Green Future is also brought to you by our incredible patrons. And our patrons are people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. Searched for Green Future, found our little Patreon page there, and looked down through the different membership levels, picked a level that matched their budget, and so every month a little tiny bit comes out of their checking account and comes over to us, and that's how we can keep this show on the air. And so we're very grateful to our patrons and to everyone who's a donor who's donated to For a Green Future over the years. And it really helps us emotionally, to know that we've got that core of people that really appreciate what we're doing here, Rebecca and I, as we come to you every week. Okay, so ecological news. First story. This is actually in Al Jazeera, which is, not popular amongst a lot of dictators around the world, but it's an excellent news source, really. And it's talking about Colombian environmental activists deluged by threats. So apparently they've discovered natural gas down there in Colombia that they're ready to start fracking. They don't have fracking yet, but they're itching to start, and so that's generated a huge public outcry. Unpopular idea to start messing with your. They're looking at us and seeing what happened when we fracked, which is the destruction of groundwater supplies and people near the fracking wells getting cancer and dying at huge, incredible rates. And they're like, we don't want to do that. And so, but there's all these armed right-wing militia groups that are basically going around threatening environmental activists. So anybody who tries to get together with the popular support there and organize things like protests or lobbying of their legislators or anything like that, they get calls. They get, people call them or they send them letters or there's a group called the Gulf Clan, which is this really terrible paramilitary group that has sort of moved in and kind of taken over the role of local government in a lot of places in Colombia. And apparently you just have to have a big gun and swear fealty to the Gulf Clan. And they're the ones that are doing the majority of these threats against environmental activists. And yeah, maybe the fracking. Yeah, not the best solution to a hippo problem, polluting your rivers with fracking fluids. I mean, it might work. You might have a whole bunch of dead hippos floating down the rivers. Yeah, that would be. Yeah, all right. So but that's something to be aware of, that Colombia is actually the most dangerous place in the world to be an environmental activist in terms of assassinations and things like that. And it's not slowing down, it's speeding up because the activism is continuing to increase because people really are trying to fight this threat of fracking. But they're not giving up. They're still fighting it. And, there was a peace agreement between a bunch of armed groups, and that in the way it made the whole country safer, but the organized armed groups that agreed to this peace agreement are now kind of moving in to sort of take over the local areas. So it's not a good situation down there. Okay, on to our next story. Right back here in the good old US of A. Los Alamos is having wildfires. Los Alamos is the nation's premier nuclear research facility, and large areas of it are contaminated with things like plutonium and uranium. And if a wildfire actually comes into the Los Alamos research area, it would create plumes of deadly radioactive smoke. But it's an interesting article. The article on this is in phys.org, titled May 14th, titled Menaced by Flames, Nuclear Lab Peers into the Future of Wildfire. So what the article spends about half of its time is that the scientists in Los Alamos, who are literally kind of huddled up, and they've got like their belongings packed in their cars in case they have to evacuate from these wildfires. As they're doing this, they're creating supercomputer simulations of wildfires so that they could better predict how they'll act in different terrains and stuff. And it's just such a weird juxtaposition that these physicists are being faced with the real physical threat of what's coming at them, these fires, and their response is to start generating these virtual worlds where they can control all the variables and kind of the, here's our beautiful simulation of reality where, fires go this way and not that way. And it's just, it sort of reminded me of how far apart from the whole literal natural living world physicists can kind of tend to be. Their reaction to those sorts of threats is to go further off into the simulations and the sort of imaginary universe they can create in their computers. So it's a weird thing, but that kind of leads me into story 2.5, which is wildfires. So in general, this is a very bad year for wildfire. According to the National Interagency Fire Center that we pay attention to, so far 2022, nationwide, from January 1st to May 13th, there have been 24,302 wildfires in the U.S., which is the highest number in the past 10 years, and I believe is a record. The number of acres burned, 1.286 million, 250 acres, and that is not the highest number in this period of time in the past 10 years, but it's right up there. I believe it's number 3. And there's fires burning right now all over the country. There are 2 new large fires. Just one popped up in Connecticut, of all places, and one in Kansas. So, which kind of gives you the feel for the fact that these wildfires are happening everywhere, not just in the Southwest or California. That literally all over the country, the wildfires are breaking out. And it's not good. And it's kind of a story that it's hard to keep watching and keep paying attention to, because it's like 24,302 wildfires. You can't even, the human mind, we can hold in our short-term memory around 7 items. So if somebody tosses 24,000 items at us, it's just kind of becomes this big blur. It's hard to even imagine that many wildfires going at once, but it's happening, and we can't afford to look away, because that is definitely one of the symptoms of climate change. Okay. What? Seven's a little high for the short-term memory thing. Yeah, well, kind of an average or midline. Okay, now, so time for a little bit of good news. And this news happened, interestingly enough, it happened on Mother's Day. It happened as we were doing our show last week on Mother's Day. And this was brought to my attention by Mark Jacobson, who's been a guest on the show. California blew way past 100% energy from renewables on Mother's Day. And they for during that day, for that 24-hour period, they got 98.06% of their power from wind, water, and solar. And then they also got some from batteries and geothermal. So the actual numbers were 54.35% from the solar, which is because of their large number of rooftop solar installations. Next was wind at 32.15%. Then hydro, which came in at 4.34. That's large hydro. Then there was small hydro, which tossed in another 1.23%. Geothermal energy, 4.2%, and then 1.79% at solar batteries. And California actually produced more energy with just those sources than they used that day. So all these people that are saying, oh, you can never produce enough power with wind and solar and hydro to meet the demand, you're wrong. California did it on Mother's Day last week. And if we keep putting up more wind and solar, they're going to keep doing that more and more often. So, all right, on to our next story. Boy, we're just moving right along here, but we've only got 5 minutes left. This is a follow-up to last week's story, where we were talking with Tim Porter about the funds that the Biden administration set aside for trains and how states have to ask for those funds. They're not just going to be given them. And we said that Governor DeWine has a deadline coming up. So I gave the governor's office a call, and amazingly, they called me back on Thursday. And what they said to me then was, there's no decision made on it yet. The staff is reviewing it. And I talked to the staffer there, and I said, look, you guys have maybe 2 weeks to make a decision here, maybe less, because that was what we heard from Tim. And lo and behold, the next day, Friday, big headline, Governor Mike DeWine asks state agency to explore Amtrak expansion, including Nuke, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati route. Right. And that's a story in Cleveland.com that ran literally yesterday. It ran. No, actually, it was published on Friday. So, talked to them on Thursday, and then on Friday they actually put it off to the Ohio Rail Development Commission and said, okay, come up with something. And what Amtrak has, you have to ask for it. And it is an election year, and he is desperately searching for stuff that people like to do, to put on that resume, because he's going up against Nan Whaley from Dayton, is the Democrat who's going to be running against him in the fall. And she's, my mother has a rule about elections that she says the more attractive candidate always wins. I don't know if that's true or not. Well, we'll see what happens, because Nan Whaley is definitely better looking than Mike DeWine. But, so Mike DeWine is really trying to pump up his resume here. And so this might happen. What Amtrak has proposed actually is 3 trains a day along this Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati route, which would be just amazing. So, right, exactly. So, like, during reasonable hours when people are actually awake. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's on its way. All right. Oh, we're running out of time. Jobs with Justice Act. We've talked about this before. HB 429 had its first hearing on May 10th. And that's the bill that hopes to reverse a lot of the horrible policies HB 6 put into place. And then before we go, I just wanted to say I'm starting a new contest, and that is, it's a little hard to find good environmental news. If you recommend to me a good story and I run with it on the show, I'm going to give you $10. So every week, if somebody finds a good news story, let me know. Send it to joe@joedemar4greenfuture.org. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare, and we are signing off. Radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that